The year was 1944, and deep in the jungles of Burma, something absolutely terrifying was about to happen. Soldiers weren't just fighting the Japanese. They were fighting actual Bengal tigers. And this wasn't some myth. This was documented military history that would haunt veterans for the rest of their lives. British and Allied forces advancing through the dense Burmese rainforest found themselves in a nightmare scenario where the traditional rules of warfare meant absolutely nothing, because their enemy wasn't just human. It was 500 pounds of pure muscle, razor-sharp claws, bone-crushing jaws, and an appetite driven by desperation and hunger that made them even more dangerous than usual. These tigers, displaced by relentless bombing raids, constant artillery fire, and the complete destruction of their natural habitat, had lost their normal prey animals that had either fled or been killed in the crossfire, and to a starving tiger that hadn't eaten in days, a sleeping soldier in a tent was just another potential meal, no different than a deer or wild boar. Men would disappear from their posts in the dead of night, dragged away so silently and efficiently that their fellow soldiers, sleeping just feet away, wouldn't even wake up, wouldn't hear a sound, wouldn't know anything was wrong until morning roll call when they realized their friend was simply gone. By sunrise, all that remained were distinctive drag marks in the mud, massive paw prints that measured nearly a foot across, and blood trails leading deep into the impenetrable jungle where no rescue party dared to follow, because they knew what waited in those shadows. The Japanese forces were facing the exact same horror on their side of the battlefield, which created this absolutely bizarre and surreal situation where both Allied and Axis soldiers were simultaneously fighting each other in vicious combat and fighting off coordinated tiger attacks, sometimes even calling unofficial temporary truces just to deal with these apex predators that didn't care about politics, nationalism, or which side anyone was on. British military reports, now declassified and available in the National Archives, documented sentries being mauled at their posts, entire patrols of experienced soldiers going missing without a trace, and men becoming so psychologically traumatized and terrified of tiger attacks that they'd rather risk enemy machine gun fire than pull night guard duty alone in the darkness. One particularly chilling documented incident describes a massive Bengal tiger casually walking through a British encampment in broad daylight, completely unbothered by the presence of hundreds of armed men, snatching a soldier who was eating lunch with his unit and vanishing back into the jungle before anyone could properly react or get off more than a few panicked shots. This wasn't the African savannah. This wasn't some colonial hunting expedition gone wrong. This was an actual World War II battlefield where men equipped with rifles, grenades, mortars, and heavy machine guns were being systematically hunted like helpless prey by animals that had learned humans were vulnerable. The psychological warfare aspect was absolutely unreal and devastating to morale. Imagine trying to maintain focus on your human enemy, watching for Japanese soldiers who wanted to kill you, when you simultaneously knew that at any random moment, a 10-foot-long, 500-pound predator could ambush you from literally any direction, from the trees above, from the dense undergrowth beside you, from the murky water you were crossing, and your standard-issue rifle that worked perfectly fine against enemy soldiers might just wound and enrage a charging tiger rather than stop it. Some units became so desperate that they started setting up special Tiger Watch rotations, posting dedicated guards specifically to watch for big cats rather than Japanese soldiers. And they'd use everything they could think of, from improvised tripwires connected to flares, to landmines, repurposed as tiger deterrents, to campfires kept burning all night, despite the risk of revealing their position to enemy forces. The tigers themselves had zero fear of gunfire or explosions, because they'd literally been born and raised in an active war zone. The constant sound of battle, artillery bombardments, rifle fire, and grenade explosions was just background noise to them. White noise they'd learned to ignore, which meant they'd attack even during active combat operations, creating absolute chaos and confusion when soldiers had to make split-second decisions about whether to shoot at the Japanese enemy fighters advancing on their position or the massive striped predator charging directly at them from a different angle. Military historians and researchers who've studied the Burma Campaign estimate that Tiger attacks killed or seriously wounded dozens, possibly even hundreds of soldiers on both sides throughout the campaign, though exact casualty numbers are extremely hard to verify and probably underestimated because many incidents were never officially reported in after-action documents. After all, how do you explain to your commanding officer that you lost multiple men, not to heroic enemy action, but to wildlife attacks? And how does that look in the official military record? The Battle of Burma and the broader Burma Campaign became legendary among military historians not just for its brutal and unforgiving jungle warfare conditions, but for being the only thoroughly documented military conflict in modern history where soldiers genuinely faced a true two-front war against both human enemies, who were trying to kill them, and nature's absolute perfect killing machines that saw them as food. And the veterans who survived and eventually made it home talked about their encounters with the tigers with noticeably more fear, more trembling in their voices, more trauma in their eyes than they ever did when discussing combat against Japanese forces. This wasn't a Hollywood screenplay. This wasn't an exaggerated campfire story. This wasn't propaganda or myth-making. This was real soldiers with real weapons facing real tigers in real terror, documented in military records, personal diaries, and official reports from one of World War II's most brutal, most forgotten, and most absolutely nightmarish combat zones, where the jungle itself became an enemy that fought alongside steel and bullets.